Hello everyone and welcome back to Football Manager 2018 and the final part of this experiment where we're taking a look at how long it would take a Tier 22 team to win the league, win the Champions League and become the best team in the world. We're currently 50 years into the future and that still hasn't happened. They are finally a Premier League team, they are established as a Premier League team. And today we are going to go about 20 or so years into the future. I'm going to keep pumping billions and billions of pounds into this club in the hope that they will achieve success. Now today's video is sponsored by the One Football app, as the last two have been. If you haven't already, make sure you click the link to download this. It gives you all the latest scores, details, transfers, everything you could possibly need for the new football season in your pocket. So click the link down below in the description and make sure you have this app for the season to come. But let's have a look at this team as it is at the moment. You can see they're doing alright. They've got a 26,000 capacity stadium. If we look at their details here, we are going to give them more money. Reputation's pretty strong, finance is very strong, and their facilities are actually really good now. They've got room to expand their stadium as well, which I imagine they will do. But we're going to have to go 20 odd years ahead now and see how they manage to, with all the extra money that I'm going to be giving them. I'm essentially going to top up their income to $1 billion every year. This is going to take me ages to do, but we're going to give them another 20 billion essentially. So let's go forward 20 years and see how the team have done. Make sure you hit that subscribe button if you haven't already. Only 16% of viewers are subscribed, so if you're one of the 84% of people watching this video that aren't, make sure you do click that subscribe button. It does help the channel grow. But let's go forward and see how they've done. Well, we are now 23 years into the future. The year is 2090. I am now dead, presumably, at this point in time. I'll be 99 years old if I am alive, so probably shoot me now. But as you can see, this is where we left off. This was the Premier League table. Newcastle had won the title. Fairwarp finished 14th. The following season, they dropped down to 16th under the threat of relegation, actually. But they managed to push up to 15th the year after. 12th the year after that, and then up to 7th place. So they're back up towards the top. They're about 9 points off Champions League football at this point. A very unusual top four, it has to be said. So you can see Aston Villa winning it, Newcastle 2nd, Watford 3rd, West Ham 4th, Chelsea 8th, City 10th, Liverpool 11th, and Manchester United are in 9th. Chelsea, I don't know what's going on there, but apparently none of the big teams are at the top. Fairwarp finishing 9th, Everton joining the top 4, Newcastle an unprecedented period of success, but Fairwarp have qualified for the Champions League for the first time ever in the year 2073. They've come from Tier 22 to the greatest stage for any club in Europe. Huge success there. Now, can they build on it in the next 20 years? No, they finished 6th. That's still European football, but they have dropped back and then finished 7th. Look at Newcastle running away with a title. I'm loving this, though. Following season, Spurs do win the title, breaking Newcastle's hold, but Fairwarp finish 6th. They then finish 6th again, becoming the new Everton, but then they managed to finish 3rd. Another season in the Champions League. They are 10 points off the top. Then 4th, they're consolidating as a Champions League team now. There's still 10 years to go, but they're hanging on there just ahead of Spurs. They then drop down to 8th with Watford winning the league. There were 3 points between 1st and 5th. What a final day of the season that must have been. And for a Watford fan, they must have died, had a heart attack. But Fairwarp finished 8th. They then finished 5th and then 3rd again, some way off Spurs at the top of the table though. And then they finished 4th, still Champions League football, just missing out the next season. Liverpool finishing with 104 points though. And then Fairwarp finished 3rd again, 2nd. They finished 20 points off the top. 2nd place looks impressive, but still a long way off the pace being set by Liverpool. Then 3rd, then 4th. And in the most recent season, they have finished 7th. So they have never won a Premier League title, which is incredibly disappointing. You can see their graph here going back 20 years. And they did, I mean, if you put like a flat line there, it's quite a good one. It is on the rise, but it has taken them so long to get here. And they've been in and around Champions League football now, going back all the way back to about 12 years, and they haven't managed to win the league, and that's despite me putting £1 billion in every single season. They've lost their manager now after finishing 7th. Their stadium, though, up to 52,000 capacity, the Fairwarp Stadium, not the Tim Tilley Stadium, which is a little bit disappointing. But they've got a stadium sponsorship deal. They're financially pretty well kitted out, state-of-the-art training facilities, top corporate facilities. If you look at their details here, reputation near max, finances are still pretty good. They did actually have a sugar daddy. I didn't put this in, but they had a sugar daddy for about 20 years. In between last episode and this episode, they did get a sugar daddy in. He's now left. But their facilities are pretty much at the max. And there's no excuse for them not winning the title. And there hasn't been for the last 10 years. This has all been true for about 10 years since the stadium went up to such a big capacity. So I don't think there is much point in doing another part to this experiment. However, we have not looked at their senior squad schedule and seen how they've done with Champions League football. So we're going to go back to the 67-68 season. We're going to drop the Premier League from the competition's view just to clean it up a little bit. And then, as you can see, in this season, got through to the semi-finals of the Carabao Cup, lost to Liverpool. Following season, again, quarter-final Carabao Cup, last 16 of the FA Cup. Poor season again. This season, though, managed to make it to the Carabao Cup semi-final, beating Bournemouth over 2 legs. And then in the Carabao Cup final, they won 2-1. Chris Bestel and Saeed Belkir. I don't know how you pronounce that, but managed to get the 2 goals. They did get one back at West Ham, but it wasn't enough, and Fairwarp win their first major piece of silverware in their club's history. It's taken a long time, over 50 years, but they have managed to do it, coming from Tier 22 to the highest level. Now, the following season, they had the Champions League luck, or the Europa League qualifying rounds. They got through these pretty comfortably, and then in their Europa League group did very well, not really losing. Out in the Carabao Cup quarter-final, out in the FA Cup, but into the knockout stages of the Europa League, they won 3-1 over Porto, then 4-0 at home, beat Spartak 1-0, then 3-2, beat Ajax 3-0 away, lost 1-0 at home, but they were already into the semis there. Drew with PSV 2-2 away from home, won 2-1 at home. They're into the Europa League final, and they won it 2-0 against Bayern Munich, so they follow up their first domestic piece of silverware with their first European silverware, a 2-0 win over Bayern Munich, and this happened 20 years ago, so who knows what's happened since then. But this was their first debut in Champions League football. They actually won the European Super Cup, beating PSG 3-1 in that game, so that's their 3rd trophy and their 2nd European one. And the Champions League not getting off to too well, defeats to PSG, Napoli twice, PSG again, meant they dropped down into the Europa League, but they are in another Carabao Cup final after beating Derby County 4-1. 3-0 in the first leg, 2-0 in the second. They then beat Aston Villa 3-1 as well. So silverware is coming into the club now. Doing well in the Europa League again, through in the quarterfinals against Derby County. In the semis, lost 1-0 away, but won 4-0 at home to put them in another Europa League final. And they lost it 2-1 to West Ham. Really disappointing that. The following season, though, you can see their Champions League group went a lot better this time around. They did make it into the knockout stages, beat Atletico 4-2 and 1-0 at home, but then lost both legs to AC Milan in the Champions League quarterfinals, the furthest that they've made it in European competition there. Back into the Europa League the next season. The domestic cup's not going well, but they did manage to win another Europa League title, 4-0 in the final, so they've won now 3 European trophies and 1 domestic trophy. That is a very unusual imbalance to have. The following season, in the Champions League, they made it to the knockout stages, beat AC Milan 1-0 away from home and then 2-0 at home this time. 2-2 with Spurs in the first leg, 1-1 away meant that they got knocked out by Spurs, but they're into the FA Cup semi-final, 3-1 win over Watford there, puts them in the final at Wembley, and they lose 3-2 to Newcastle United, missing out on another piece of silverware. But they get into these finals pretty much every season now. And they're in the Europa League quarterfinals again here, beat PSV 7-3 on aggregate out of the FA Cup quarterfinals, 3-0 defeat away from home against Leverkusen, knocked them out of the Europa League quarterfinals as well. Following season, Europa League, they are a mainstay of this competition now. Managed to get through in the Carabao Cup against Newcastle on penalties, and in the final they actually won 3-0 against Chelsea. 2 for Ferreira, 1 for Hudson, 3-0 up 11 minutes into a cup final. Another trophy for them. Europa League knockout stage is going well, and in the quarterfinals, 1-1 with Arsenal, won 2-1 away into the semis, and the FA Cup semis as well. Beat Everton 1-0 in the first leg of the semi-finals, but 3-1 away means they miss out. They did make it to the FA Cup final, but lost there as well, 2-0. But really good cup runs going on. Champions League knockout stages, beaten by Real Madrid 5-1 on aggregate. Following season again, doing well, getting through the cups. Lost in the final of the Carabao Cup on penalties, and also lost in the final of the FA Cup 1-0 to Spurs. So that's a little bit disappointing for them. Following season, again, doing very well, knocked out the FA Cup quarterfinals, but into the quarterfinals of the Europa League and beat Espanyol 4-0 on aggregate, drew 2-2 at home with Spartak, won 2-1 away, another Europa League final, which they have won on penalties. 1-1 the final score. They did take it on penalties, another European trophy in the cabinet for them. But the following season, not able to build on that in the Champions League, knocked out by Spurs at the quarterfinal stage. Following season, into the Champions League knockout stages, but lost 3-2 on aggregate there, if I can just add up. But not doing too well in the other cup competitions. Again, into the Champions League knockout stages, but beaten by Real Madrid this time. No success in the other trophies. And then in the Europa League for another season, did really well, got to the semi-finals, won 2-1 away but lost 3-2 at home, so knocked out on away goals there by West Ham. And following season into the FA Cup quarterfinals, knocked out on away goals in the Champions League quarterfinals by Bayern Munich. Following season again, Champions League knockout stages, they beat AC Milan 2-1 on aggregate, lost to Barcelona 2-1 away, but at home beaten 3-1. Made it to the FA Cup final though, and they did win this 4-1 against Watford, so another trophy in the cabinet. Following season, nothing, knocked out on away goals again in the Champions League quarterfinals. They cannot make the semis, out in the first round there. And then the most recent season, knocked out again in the first knockout stages. So they've not had Champions League success by any stretch of the imagination. But if we look at their trophy cabinet overall, you can see runner-up in the Premier League, 3 Europa League titles, 1 UEFA Super Cup as well in 2072, won 1 FA Cup and 3 Carabao Cups. So they've now won 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 major titles and runner-up in the Premier League as well. They've got so close, but just not been able to do it. And they've had 10 years at this level. It's not happened. I don't think it's worth going any further forward with this experiment. We will just have a look at their managerial history, see if anybody managed to keep up with Tim Tilley as manager. They've become an established top 4 team. There's no doubt about that. They're one of the biggest teams in England. 52,000 capacity stadium, just shy of Newcastle. The game taking so long to load with all this information going back 100 years now of live information that it's having to reload. But yeah, I've been quite disappointed they've not managed to make it. This is exactly what happened with our non-league billionaire experiment as well. They just cannot get to that level. No matter how much further I push this forward, they are just not going to reach that level. But you can see their managerial record here. The latest manager, Ilir Gashi, getting sacked. Just going to look for long-term managers here. Toto got 6 years before being sacked. He won 4 of their cup titles as well. So he was the manager that really delivered big success. 3 years, 9 days, 1 year, 2 years, 1 year, 1 year, 3 years, 2 years. This was the uncertain times after Tim Tilley managed to win 18 league titles and 53 cup competitions before leaving the club. After 18 and a half years walking away from a club that you brought up the ranks like that is really just very strange. But the next longest serving manager did win 4 cup competitions for them between 67 and 74. but it wasn't enough, and Tim Tilley now gone from the game. We can't even click on him, but without doubt the most successful manager in their history. If we look at the profile of Fairwarp, or the general information, we can see the legends here on the left hand side. Tim Tilley, the only legendary manager, but you've got players like Ben Irwin, Kieran Scott, Lee Dunbar, Gary Gibbons-Frost and Andriy Makarov, who is clickable as a player. He's still playing at Fairwarp. He is a legend of the club now, been there for a little while, signed for £83 million, and has spent a decade at the club, helping them win pretty much all of their major honours as well. So he is a legend of the club. Quite a few icons, one favoured personnel at the moment. If we just flick through their transfers going back, you'll see how much money I have put into the club. 166, 95, 183, 199, 190, 224. They've spent a fortune pretty much every season they haven't been under embargo. 265 million embargoed, 269 million, 388 million pounds spent that season. And yet they just haven't been able to win anything. Every season they've had so much money and they haven't been able to win the Premier League or the Champions League. It's so frustrating. I've given them so many opportunities and they've not managed to do it. So I think that will be it for this series. If you have enjoyed it, do drop a like on the video. Make sure you're subscribed to the channel. And until next time, see ya.